Hope you're enjoying your barbecue. We got questions coming in. And I want to introduce somebody new to you guys that y'all have not met yet. This is Kate Terry. She is the Director of Equipping, Austin Stone Downtown Campus. And so she is going to be with us today. She has a background working with college students here at the Stone and so has a great, valuable voice for these conversations that we're going to have. So I want to kick off with this question, and then we've got questions coming in that we'll get to. But let's jump off here. All right. So if you look at any church conference, or you hear all these things about how to reach millennials, well that sounds great. But those people are having like babies and have families and stuff now. So we're talking college students is reaching Generation Z. So I want to just lob this softball up to you guys and say, as you think about the future of college students, reaching college students, developing college students, what are what does that kind of look like? I know it's kind of broad, but like do we need a change in the way we're thinking about reaching, maybe even developing with just the changes in technology? What are some of the things that you've seen that maybe you just had to tweak along the way that, hey, 5 years ago this worked, now doesn't work so much? So what kind of thoughts do y'all have?
Yeah, everybody kind of looked at me because they were like, "You're the prime millennial or Gen Z person up here."
You're the back end.
I don't know. So I would definitely say meaningful ministry is huge. One of the things that we talked about in my breakout session and things that Drew just talked about was we want to equip people to do the work of the ministry, but that doesn't mean how we think it looks in Americanized Christianity. So we want to give people meaningful things, valuable things to join us in doing ministry at our churches. So what that means is that people who are younger and younger see through the crap a lot faster. So they see through the smoke, they see through the lasers, they see through the big services you're inviting people to come to. And they want to see meaningful things. They want to see, how is Jesus actually changing everything about your life, like in this room and outside of this room? So I think that relationally, if you can do well to care for people relationally, if you can be a presence on campus, not a presence of consuming things on campus, like you're only going on campus to rent rooms and still kind of low-key telling people to come to your event, we're on campus. That's not really what Drew was trying to say earlier. But if you continue to say, hey, come consume, instead of, hey, we're here on this campus to contribute, we're here on this campus to bless the campus, students are going to see that. They're going to see that you don't just care about instilling the knowledge that you have about God into them, but you also care about them holistically. And from what I've seen in my short number of years doing college ministry is that matters a lot. And that also will multiply in how they care for people and how they make disciples. So I actually think that millennials and Gen Z have a lot to teach the church culture as is right now. Because they're okay with not having all the crazy big events with lasers and stuff like that. They just want to know that they're cared about and loved. And when it comes to the gospel message that we proclaim, they want to know that there's not a God that's far away that only is present in our big rooms and events, but they want to know that there's a God that's near. There's a God that loves them. There's a God that sent his one and only Son from the comforts of heaven for them.
It's good. Next question. I'm sorry, Kate.
No, it's okay.
No, go.
I was just going to throw it out there. I think we've got to be willing to kind of think outside the box and do some things that maybe historically haven't been kind of in the playbook. A few years ago, like we just realized at our congregation at downtown meets at Austin High School. We've got an auditorium, and on any given Sunday, we've got 2,500, 3,000 people that come in and out. Our evening services historically have been a ton of college students and young adults, and we've seen God really bless that. But really here over the past few years, we've seen a decline in that space, and have just realized with this kind of new generation that's moving to Austin and coming to be a college student that there can't be the assumption anymore that they grew up in a church household, that it's normal to them to kind of go to church on a Sunday, that's even a desire, and that they're asking a lot of questions. And so we realized, if we really want to reach the city of Austin, in the similar way Drew is kind of saying, man, go where they already are and step into their world instead of just asking them to come into yours. We had to be willing to get creative with that. And so we kind of came up, and this isn't all, I believe relationship has to be tied with this. It can't just be event-based ministry. But we started doing an event called Focus, which was talking about topics that were happening in culture, questions about faith, questions about anxiety and depression, about race, about women's roles in the church. And we held this outside of a Sunday, outside of our church context, in an actual music venue, in a downtown kind of cool space. And what we saw is that we were reaching men and women who would never show up on a Sunday, but that came in and got to hear, hey, the Bible speaks to these things. God's word does help bring these topics that can be confusing and kind of can be scary to talk about, helps them bring them into focus. And that was the intent of that time. And we've seen just a ton of success in reaching people that would never attend. And so I think things like that can be intimidating and scary. And I definitely wouldn't recommend just don't become an expert in an area that you're not an expert in. And so don't feel the need to push the envelope on topics that maybe you're not prepared to. But in what ways can you start to have conversations about things that this group of 18-year-olds are talking about, that they're for sure, the world is talking to them about it. But how does the church engage in this in an appropriate and a healthy way?
I want to ask a follow-up here. So for you guys, and Mitch, you could speak to this too. One of the things so I'm going to interpret that a certain way, and I'm going to interpret Drew's talk a certain way, don't do a good big event. Okay, so I hear that from people who are like, this generation doesn't like big events, so don't do it. And I'm like, I think you might be reading that the wrong way. They don't, so when we say the big event, go back 2 generations, the big event was the entry point. Okay, the seeker-sensitive movement was basically a reaction to crappy church. You guys know that, right? People hey, if you do better church, people come in the doors. And what you realize is, yeah, actually that really worked. This generation is not reacting to, I grew up in cruddy church. They didn't grow up in church, okay? So that's a different generational question. But when they come in the doors, they actually there's still an importance to the gathered church. And so our context says, don't get away from gatherings. Just don't think they're just going to walk in the door because you throw a big event, because they don't do that. They only come because of relationship. So we emphasize relationship as a gateway to the gathering, but we don't stop doing the gathering. So I'm curious, are you guys, because I hear some people hey, you need to move away from gatherings, just do smells and bells. And smells and bells, that's like Orthodox church where you light candles and stuff and ring bells. And I actually think that is an incredibly niched reaction. I don't think that is the general reaction. I think they actually still want mass, and they still want fairly large gatherings. I know that's kind of weird, but I think that people are overcorrecting sometimes for the Gen Z thing. So I'm curious on you guys' reaction to that.
I totally agree. The example I was giving was a large gathering, and we saw a lot of momentum there. And so it's definitely not anti-large gathering. We saw people turn out in 500, 600 people when we talked about depression and anxiety. We are hitting a felt need. But if we're going to help them grow in spiritual maturity in their love for Christ and seeing him as a king, it's going to have to follow up with a relationship. It's going to have to be a connecting point. And so, we did the best that we could at that. I think you got to be honest with, you're limited with large gatherings and the ways that you can do that. I think the other side of that coin is that we're dealing with the loneliest generation of all time. And so large gatherings can be deceiving because you've got a lot of people in a room, and like you said, yeah, this is real successful, this is awesome, but everyone feels disconnected. There's that depth is about an inch thick. And man, that's a failure. The family of God, we're made for relationship. And so large events are great, and I think there is an attractiveness to critical mass. That's okay, and to build around, but if you're not putting just as much energy to the follow-up, which I'll be the first to say we haven't done a great job of. We normally drop the ball there. We're great in the lead-up, we're great in the event, and then the follow-up is where we really lack the connection and showing them, hey, we care about more than you just being a butt in a seat. We want a relationship with you. We want to help you join the family of God. And we provided connection points after that kind of large event for people to do that, and one-on-one kind of conversations after for those that were still wrestling with those questions. And then we admitted and were honest where we couldn't do that perfectly, right? But that would be part of my response to that.
I think we should get rid of the gathering completely. No, I'm just kidding. We love it. And I think there is something really, really special. This generation, more than any other, I think the loneliness, Kate, that you tapped onto, I mean, is massive. With the cell phones, I mean, it just continues to get crazier and crazier and crazier. I think they want, like, Mitchell, I love the way you said, they want something real. And I think they walk into, no offense to the typical megachurch, but the stereotype is that it is very plastic and it's borderline pageant, and it feels like very scripted, and people walk in, and this generation goes, no, I don't want that. There is a little bit like not bells and smells. There you go, smells and bells. There is a piece. I wouldn't swing all the way over there. There is a piece that you start to watch this generation kind of look for a little bit of like some liturgy, some stuff like that. So we're not going. And I think the reason is they're begging for something that's older than 5 years old. I want something that's been around. That more than just this fad of lasers and smoke. Like, is there something that seems like it's stood the age of time? And that's they want something that's stable in their life when everything else has been unstable. But you're right, they have no church background. They're not coming to check it out. So
you notice the ancient thing appeals to this generation? Like, everybody's like, man, we just need to do home births. You know that death rates were much, much higher in infancy when you had kids not in hospitals, okay? So, but why does that appeal to people now? Because it's old. So I know that sounds weird, but like, go to Salt Company, we do liturgical readings all the time. Yeah. Let's open in just a psalm of prayer. And then we literally, with like white text on a black screen, everyone is quiet and we read a psalm together. Like, that's very normal with 1,500.
And they love it.
And they're like they're actually far more open than our 50-year-olds. Our 50-year-olds were all like, the kids are going to want the lasers. I'm like, you don't know jack crap about kids. They don't want any of that. And so it's interesting. I'm going to push on this too, even in personal practice. I think you're going to need to teach spiritual disciplines differently. Because you just go, hey, Bible reading plan and prayer app, and you need a prayer journal. I think you need a much more holistic mode of teaching. So I talk about like the formative practices of sacred rhythms. That's the verbiage I would use around spiritual disciplines. I would never use the terminology spiritual disciplines. Teaching, I'd say, what's a sacred rhythm of the day look like? To begin with quietness and prayer, and to stop and hit your knees. I'm embodying spiritual practice for people who've disconnected from their bodies from technology usage. So I'm really thinking hard about the way in which liturgical practice forms us. So I'm reading James K. Smith and stuff like that, and I'm saying, okay, a liturgical practice is how I embody my theology and speak it back, so that there's this virtuous loop of what I believe enacted in what I do, which reinforces what I believe. You have to have practice and theology. I'm getting a little deep on that. So, but I'm thinking actually millennially, you're not just going to be able to say, here's a Bible reading plan. You need to connect that to a formative practice of restoring true humanity in a generation that feels like actually this technology is killing us, because it really is. It really is. And so Christianity has better theological resources to offer to that, but we're going to have to do more than say, read your Bible, pray every day. It's going to have to be nuanced a little different for that generation for it to stick.
To be honest, I did not think liturgy was going to come up in this at all, but it did. So, hey, you never know.
It's hot right now.
here's a question. So I've grown up in my walk with Christ in a Southern Baptist culture. So typically that meant when you have people in a room, the women are on the left, the men on the right, and everything is just completely separated. And I think even when we think about making disciples, we think about developing leaders. Honestly, women have got the shaft. Everything is very male-dominated, and what happened is we've developed men and we've kind of left women behind. So, Kate, I think I'd love to, and I think we would love to hear from you as well as you guys about how are we making disciples of women and developing women leaders and empowering them in the mission of God.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think I've been kind of like sitting on this for this past week as I have these conversations often at our church and with different members of our church, but kind of thinking about speaking to this audience, what would be most encouraging to you guys and most helpful. And I think the first thing that like kind of keeps coming to my mind is don't let my words and kind of my experience with this like be the directive as much as asking the women in your ministry and asking those women that are peers alongside you, those that you're supervising, those that you're leading. I think the reason why I'm so burdened for that is that this should start with a conversation. Like this should start with you and I'm speaking to the men in the room, really like being a brother, like learning to ask good questions and listen and hear what women in your ministry, your peers, maybe what their experience has been, what their giftings are, what they're ambitious for, where they want to serve and lead. Because I can tell you my own experience, but it's going to be maybe different in your context or for the women in their ministry. I think everyone, male and female, but since we're talking about this in particular, is walking in with their own story of church leadership and their perception of that, and maybe the ways that they've been hurt by it or flourished under it, right? And so if you start to make assumptions or generalizations, it's going to get you in trouble. I think it's going to be harder. You're going to kind of have to backtrack later. And so I would just encourage you, if there's specific women in your mind right now that you're like, man, I think I've noticed like a potential of leadership and of a desire for them to do more in my ministry, sit down with them and talk to them about it and ask their experience and learn to be a brother to them. And if you're hearing me say this and you're thinking, well, that's good, but maybe you're just not understanding really like, why is this such an important thing for us to work towards and talk about? I would just encourage you, God has reconciled us so that we would be reconcilers and so that we would go and work to restore all things in this earth. And I believe something he wants to call the church to restore and be the best and broken, yes, but a healthy model of the family of God is the relationships between brother and sister. And I think we have a long way to go on that front, but it's going to start. But I've been very encouraged, and I've flourished under the leadership here at the Austin Stone in the ways that my brothers have pursued me and empowered me in my gifting, have given me opportunity. And so, man, what sweeter thing to be a part of than helping restore a better picture for how the family of God should operate to a world that's lonely, to a world that's broken, to a world that's just looking for a connection and looking to be a part of something. And so that's one of many reasons why I believe that it's important. I think in the kind of identifying, training them, man, invite them to the table. Invite them into the conversations about your ministry. If you don't even know where to start with this, you don't know how to do this, that's okay. Admit that. I think that for those of you in the room that don't know even, there's not anyone that's coming to mind, where do I start? I'm willing to bet there's a godly woman in your congregation that could help you. That would want to come alongside you and help identify some women that are eager to serve and lead in your ministry. And then from there, just think about the environments where you're training leaders, the environments where you're sitting down and discipling men. What could be co-ed? What could be where you're training a room or in a cohort with maybe a female leader as well? Like what could be done side by side with a sister? Because I think there's more for us to be had when we prioritize that and when we seek that out. And I believe that will help with identifying women who have that leadership gifting and want to lead. I think another thing I'd say, and I know this is going to kind of be specific to each of y'all's contexts, but drive to clarity where it's possible with what it means for women to lead in your church. it's more hurtful often when you just kind of glaze over some things, but don't drive to clarity. And I know that means hard conversations. I've been a part of a lot of them, but it's worth it. It's okay. It's good. It's, in fact, really healthy and right to get to the end of a conversation and just say, I don't know. We still don't know. Let's keep talking about it. Let's keep working at it. That's all right. That shows value. That shows care. For our church in particular, I think some language we've started to use that's been helpful. But again, this might not be exactly transferable to your context. But we've said, man, we want women to have every opportunity to teach or to lead that a non-elder male would have. We want women to have opportunities to lead and teach in environments just like my brother Mitchell would have. And we don't want to just default to kind of limiting those environments to what might just be kind of comfortable, because that's what's been done in the past. Really practically for us, that's meant our campus pastor, Tyler David, has really gone above and beyond to give visibility to women in leadership when it's appropriate and when it's possible. And so an example of that is on Easter Sunday, he wanted myself and another female on staff to do announcements on Easter Sunday, because he just saw it as an opportunity for so many visitors that were going to be stepping into our church to not have a doubt in their mind when they sat down and when they saw leadership on the stage, that we value and we believe in women leading and coming alongside men to help the church flourish. And it was an opportunity on a very big Sunday, obviously, to communicate that. And so I'll kind of end there. I can expand if y'all have got additional questions where needed, but I think just to go back to where I began, like start with conversations. Start with listening and learning where your sisters are gifted and then helping empower them in areas where that's appropriate.
That's great. Thank you, Kate. Question that we got in here. When you're considering like new staff or leaders in your church, what are some of the key characteristics that you look for? Specifically, what are the things that you have found have been hard to teach and cultivate, like if it's not already there, and what are the things that you've found to be kind of easier to teach and coach people through?
Okay, so let me try to think. I'm just going to kind of rattle some off. We don't have like a document or anything. It is impossible to lead someone who's not teachable. I think there's a humility aspect that you're looking at. Like there's just, it's so difficult. I think I would hire someone with low competency if they're just teachable. And then I think we've had a lot of conversations even with our residents. One of the biggest things kind of getting into the end of year one that I've been like, man, with this generation, this new wave of leaders, I feel like if I could boil it down, it's to just a lack of like the ability to self-start. And I feel like if somebody walks in and they're willing to start something, there's this like little bit of hustle that they have, man, you could change the world. They don't even have to know Jesus yet. I'd probably hire someone who doesn't know Jesus, and then I'm just kidding. Maybe I'm kidding. I don't know. Because there's just because like you can't hold their hand all the time, and we joked at Resonate all the time. Said if I hire you and I have to do your job and my job, I want your paycheck. And so I think that hustle, that self-starterness, along with the teachability and humility.
Okay, I'll rattle some off. The first is, before you look for who you're supposed to hire, you need to know your own culture and your own smell. So we hire people who I want to hang with on a Friday, and if I don't want to do that, I'm not going to hire you. Absolutely no way. Second, we look for people with grit. Grit is something I can't teach. So if I asked you, I gave you a metal spoon and told you to dig through that wall, I better be able to come back in 3 days and see a hole. So if you don't think you could dig through a wall with a metal spoon, I don't know. You'd figure it out if you had grit. And so, listen, guys, I will love you for free, but I'm paying you to do a job, and I need to know you're going to work hard at it. And so I just tell people that straight up, like, we love you for free, but if we're going to pay you, we need you to have the requisite grit to do what we're going to ask you to do. What we call, what Drew said is we call that batteries. Do you have an ability to have emotional batteries that you know how to fill back up and recharge yourself? Or do you walk down the halls and slowly drain the battery life out of everybody else and leech your energy from them? If so, you're an energy vampire, and we don't hire those either. And then, I think the other one is just do you love Jesus like crazy? And that manifest in that you love lost people, and lost people have come to know Jesus because they came to know you. We look for that.
I think the only thing I'll add real quick is that if there isn't a like character and serving, if those aren't proven, like a lot of people can say that they've got character because of certain things or they've served in this capacity, but in my opinion, they're not ready to lead if there isn't proven service and proven character, because those are things that they're going to have to like lead out of and pour out of, and that can't be something, in my opinion, that is developed while they're leading. That needs to be something, of course, will continue to be developed, but it can't be shaped in order, before they get the job.
And it's really important to know what you're hiring for. Like our entry-level resident who's just coming into ministry, I'm willing to work a lot more on formation. But the further you go up the org chart and up the pay chart, the further I can't be doing developmental work, or developmental work means you're not ready for the job. And so the further up you go, so some people are like, man, I'd really like to be paid more. And I'll say to them, that's awesome, but I'm going to fire you a lot faster. Like, if you hit that pay scale, the threshold of excellence that we're going to hold you to is significantly higher than where you're at right now. Are you ready to be fired faster? Now, because everybody's ready to be paid more. Are you ready to be let go quicker if you fail? Because that's actually what it means. The higher you get up the organizational chart is your margins get smaller. And so, no, not just the person you're after, but the position you're looking for. What's your requisite standard of excellence so that you communicate that on the front end and you're honest with people about it?
Let's add on to that. What is so we're thinking about what to look for in a leader, how what are the traits, but what is a practical example of proper empowerment of a college student? Practical example of proper empowerment of a college student.
I'm just getting us started. Then Mitchell's got a lot of stuff. You do this really well. I think the practical example for them is just leverage the power of their proximity to lost people. Their strategic advantage is not their ability to do a worship service or to lead a Bible study, but the fact that they're taking Art 201 next to people who don't know Jesus. And so a proper example of empowerment is say, love the person. So here's a phrase that we use, is we say, as the person that you now are in Jesus, love the person that you were when you didn't know him. Love the person you used to be. And so you go into class, you're surrounded by people that you used to be. You used to be in darkness. You remember what that was like. Love the person you once were. And then another example is like we do this thing at Salt Company called 515. This is the new Salt staff. They do this so well. 5 minutes before Salt Company, 1 minute during Salt Company, 5 minutes after. 515. You have an intentional conversation with somebody that you don't know. Every college student can do that, to engage intentionally with somebody else. So teach them easy ways to leverage the relational proximity for gospel effectiveness.
Yeah. What I would say is that your college students are better missionaries on their campus than you are if they had the same training and equipping and knowledge that you have now. So understanding your role as an equipper and seeing them not as like a mere reflection. If you came to my breakout session, I talked a little bit about this, how some of our student leaders, we would ask them, man, why you've been a small group leader for a couple years, why hasn't your group multiplied, or why aren't more people in your group? Like, what's kind of happening here? And then I'll ask them, man, who can come up and lead next year? And they would be like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, so let's say if you were to die for some reason, and like, you guys know all this, if you were to die for some reason, who would just assume leadership? They're like, all right, well, Susie would assume leadership. All right, well, then Susie should be the next person that you're raising up. And so you want to help them multiply their lives, but also you want to sit down with them like across a table with them. And I know this super relational oriented millennial right here, but like you want to sit down and like have a conversation with them, look them in their eyes and tell them what they're good at. Like tell them what they're good at. Draw out their gifts, draw out the character that you see, because everybody's taking the Enneagram, everybody's taking Myers-Briggs, all these different things, and they're looking to those things to define who they are and what their spiritual gifts even are. But that's the job of the church. Like we're supposed to be affirming those things. So sit down, and that's what happened with me, even discerning a call to ministry. Like a couple pastors sat down with me and they were like, hey, this is what we see in you. We want to pull that out. That's what we should be doing. That's going to fire them up. They will run through walls when they're encouraged. And last thing, just with empowering leaders, man, don't do the things that like you don't have to do. Like your ministry isn't built so that you would have more fame, so that you could be the next Mark Vance or Drew Worsham or Kate Terry or Matt Chandler. You know, they're all the same, by the way, all on the same level. So, but like your ministry exists so that the body would build itself up in love. The body builds itself up in love. So, man, your students have gifts. They have knowledge. UT students are way smarter than I am right now. Like they know what they're doing. They just need direction and care and shepherding and encouragement and equipping, the things that we're supposed to give them.
I think a lot of times when we think, well, let me pause. Students want to be involved. They want to participate. They don't want to just show up. And so if you can, there are certain tasks that just need to be done, like setting chairs and tables out. Those things are great, but I think a way you can empower them is to let them run with it. To go, hey, every week these chairs and these tables need to set up. Would you be willing to lead a team that makes sure these things are set up? And you can do this and you have creative space. I think them owning it versus just, hey, every week show up, let me give you this task. They get real bored. I get really bored real quick if somebody were to lead me that way. And so, but if someone said, hey, the vision is we've got to have seats and we want people to live in community, think about that and maybe what we put on the table. They run with those things, and so give them, and you really can't screw it up. Like that's what's really helpful. And I think coming alongside them with our missional communities, I mean, I'm willing to take, a group of missional community leaders that are new and they're growing and go, hey, I want to empower you. I want you to lead this, and asking the questions, what do you feel like you need to do? Like, your people. You're hanging out with them. I'm not hanging out with them. What do they need? Is it this, or this? And kind of help guide them. And so I think being really close, but letting them make decisions. And they go, I think they need this. They go, I love it. Let's run in that direction and see what happens. And if it fails, we'll come back, we'll debrief, and we'll grow from it, both of us. And I think that's super helpful. Finding out what is it that's unique about them, and then kind of empowering that piece. And so don't put the guy who loves tech stuff, moving chairs when he could be back there running ProPresenter and running that. So just whatever is unique to them as well.
That's good. Last question here is how, I think during the contemporary church growth, days, models of ministry, we had a strategy of reaching people. Let's just reach people that are alike. And so we have a lot of churches where everybody looks the same. And so how do we, what would some things that you would say are, what were some things that you would say on how do we create a ministry that looks like heaven? Because when we get to heaven, we're not all going to look alike. So what does it look like to create that kind of ministry?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people think they just think about race when it comes to this. I want you to think about more than that, because there is going to be so many different races of people in heaven, and Jesus isn't white either. I say that all the time, and like students are like, "What? Jesus is not white?" Like, no, he's not white. America's been lying to you. He's from the Middle East, y'all.
But he's got blue eyes.
Yeah. So look, it's more than just race and ethnicity. It's personality. It's affinity groups. Like, I remember when we were all trying to be cool in high school, everybody had a group that we were just like, oh yeah, those people are nerds. Like, And I don't know who the band people would say that about, or the chess people would say that about. But like they would be like, you have a group that you do not like, right? Or that you just don't vibe with. But it's different in the kingdom of heaven. You're going to be worshiping next to people who you just don't vibe and get along with. I think that what having a ministry, or even backtracking from that, pursuing people who not just look different from you, but also act different than you, are in different places than you. I think that we need to really take a hard look at what our ministry is, because we may have 2,000 people in our church, but they all live in one area. We may have 200 people in our college ministry, but they might be in the same fraternities and sororities, or in the Christian bubble. And heaven's going to look so much different than that. Jesus calls us to pray on earth as it is in heaven, on earth as it is in heaven. And what that means for us is that as we pray that, our heart would be more like Jesus' heart, where he pulls people in, who are outcasts. We see tax collectors, like Jesus hanging out and having dinner with them. We see Jesus with people who aren't Jews. We see him give a story of the Good Samaritan, who Jews hate. And that Good Samaritan was the hero of that story, representing Jesus. So there's so many things about the things that we're doing on college campuses. And also that's another aspect of ministry as a millennial, but man, talking about reaching millennials, Gen Z, man, younger and younger students, that they're going to walk in the churches, and if they see the same type of white people, it communicates something deeper than just, man, we're here to worship Jesus. I think it communicates what heaven looks like. And what it could communicate to someone like me who's African American and who doesn't like, things, maybe a ton of things that other white people like, it could communicate to me that, man, maybe heaven isn't a place for me if I didn't know Jesus. Like maybe this isn't a community for me. Or if, there's a bunch of popular kids. This is something that we struggle with, when I was in Lubbock. Like we had, the popular Christian bubble kids. It's like where youth group kids grow up and they just find a way to, get super popular. But like they're in all these big Christian organizations. But then we have students come to our church who aren't in those organizations, and our students suck at even going and talking to them for 5 minutes. So teaching our students and even modeling that ourselves, like having you as a leader, even if you're about to go and preach a sermon, if that's your role, if you're about to do announcements and doing those things, like making sure before and after those things, you're just meeting with those people who kind of seem like the oddball out, coming to your gatherings, that you're going to the places on campus where, man, your students are maybe afraid to go. And yeah, there's so much I feel like I could say towards that, but I think it's more than just race and ethnicity. I think it's all those different things, like personality for real. Like there's some people tell me they don't like The Office, and I'm like, I don't like you. Or they'll tell me about Marvel movies, and I'm like, I don't like you. But it's like those people are going to be in heaven too, right? And that's on a very small scale. Yeah, kind of.
Well,
I was just gonna. I think another piece of this, as you're talking to your college students about this, that has been really formative for me as our leadership, as we've been talking a lot about race and what this looks like in our church, is understanding, see this as an opportunity to teach yourself, teach your college students, that the hard thing is often like the right thing, and that endurance and perseverance, this is an opportunity for that to be developed. And this is what I mean by that, because I don't mean that it's like this should be a burden or really hard to build friendship with someone that's different than you. But there's a reality that the topic of race, for those of us that are white, we start talking about it, we start engaging in conversation with those that are from a different background than us, that look different than us, that we're going to become exhausted faster. And you just feel the weight of it, and you feel how big it is, and you kind of leave that conversation. And I think what you need to realize, and this is just encouragement that's come from our leadership, is that I leave that conversation and I get to check out. I get to check out and check back into majority culture that makes me feel comfortable, that, is built for me. And my brother or sister doesn't ever check out from that reality. And so there, give yourself like grace. Like you're gonna feel exhausted because this is foreign to you. Like having these conversations is gonna be like building a new muscle. And so when it gets hard, when it gets exhausting, don't let that be an excuse to check out. See it as an opportunity to actually like link arms with those that are different than you and understand a little bit of their experience even. So just encouragement as you kind of pursue those conversations.
Dang, that was good. That was really good. Well, that's awesome. Well, I was going to say something similar, but Kate just hit that out of the park, so I won't go any further. All right. Well, guys, give them a hand. Thank you guys so much for your time and for being here.